Morning, citizens. You join me again on a beautiful morning. Um, a surprisingly rare beautiful morning these days. Um, and this is down the back of my garden. And I come down here quite a lot um, because it is kind of a sanctuary for me. And I'm extremely lucky to have it. And I think about 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 how pleasant it is. And I try not to think about how unpleasant things are going to get or are likely going to get. And sometimes you come across um, somebody who puts something into words that you've been thinking about for a long time, and you haven't really wanted to. In a way, you haven't really wanted to say it, not out of fear or anything, but just because you didn't want to you didn't want to believe it yourself. You wanted to. It's too black for you to really want to acknowledge. But someone comes along and does acknowledge it, and it jolts you into another reality in a way. Um, I read something from a a guy I follow on Twitter. He goes by the name Northern Variant. You'll probably be aware of him, but I'll try and put it in description if I can remember. And he was saying that what I've been thinking for some time is that if things go along the way they are going, the milder version of what I think is going to happen is that this country is going to end up like Northern Ireland was at the height of the Troubles. Um, and I say that's the milder version because for all the horrors that took place during then, I mean, it was at least contained. And I'm not taking any kind of side on this on that issue, but the three great, you know, um, it's so-called eternal conflicts, weeping sores of the world were the Israel-Palestine situation, South Africa, and Northern Ireland, and but Northern Ireland was tiny. The amount of casualties in Northern Ireland was tiny compared to those other two, and those other two are continuing to rage. And although what's happened in Northern Ireland of late has calmed down significantly, and is to the credit of most people in Northern Ireland, um, it is a likely scenario. Um, and one of the things that I think is likely is that if we carry on our current trajectory, society is going to divide not on uh, you know Protestant Catholic lines, but sectarian lines nonetheless. And the most obvious and most brutal of those is along racial lines. Um, the indigenous white population are going to feel increasingly marginalised, and very many of the white population are still in denial about what's going on here. And all the lefties are going to continue to take the side of militant Islam over the side of a, secular liberal democracy, for some bizarre reason. And they're going to continue to smear as racist anybody who tries to point this out. This is our great debt to Tommy Robinson. He's been banging on about this for 20 years. And, things are beginning to change. He's becoming quite the statesman, really, which is quite something. And, he deserves that. But as always, the normies are our biggest enemy, because their connivance and their compliance with and their denial is what is putting us all in danger. And there are precedents for this. I mean, there's 4 that I can think of off the bat. There's Yugoslavia. What happened there? And that was a violent spasm that overtook a few years, but now it seems to be fine. But the other examples are South Africa, Lebanon, and Iran. In South Africa, we've just got institutional revenge taking place by the sounds of it, and it sounds horrific. I don't know enough about it, but that's an example. The other example of Lebanon is that the Lebanon used to be evenly split between Muslims and Christians, with a smattering of Jews as well. And the influx of millions of Muslims upset the balance, and it destroyed the country. And they're still living with that now. And many of those who destroyed the country, who flowed into Lebanon, were Palestinians. But the one that really shocked me was when I was at the demo last Saturday, that the 2-tier policing Tommy Robinson thing. One of the speakers, Mayor Tusi, who I'm sure you were aware of, I think it was him, because it's interesting because out of all the speakers there were 3 Iranians, and he was one of them. And I don't know if it was him, but one of the Iranians said that in 1977, if you were to say to people in Iran, the mullahs are going to take over, they would have laughed at you. They would have said, no, they're just a minority, they're a fringe minority, they're never going to take over. And 2 years later they did. And they've been there for 45 years. "45 years of living in a country where every woman's got to walk around with a fucking bag on her head." So there is a sort of normality bias to how people think about these things. It's along with all the all the COVID stuff that woke a few people up. Very many more remain completely asleep to what's going on. They didn't even acknowledge that their free society was being dismantled in front of their very eyes, and many of them just complied with it, and a nasty chunk of the population cheered it on. You know, cheered it on to cheered on what was essentially fascism, really. One of the things that I find is difficult is maintaining a level of um, what would you call it? Maintaining a level of enthusiasm for speaking up, because if you pin it down to one or two issues, it's the lockdowns, it's the masks, um, it's the injectables, it's illegal immigration, you know, it's surveillance. Even if you pin it down to just two or three of those things, you can present yourself as someone who's quite happy to live in society and continue to abide by society's norms. Like you're not some caveman who wants to go live back in the woods, and you can sort of give the impression that if you could just get those things sorted out, I'd be quite happy to live back in my normal society. But it is so many things. It is so many things. Maybe 6 months ago, I thought the biggest threat to us was um, a cashless society, and I still do believe that is a really serious threat. It really is. Um, but I think migration has overtaken that as the number one clear and present danger. Um, and one of the things that I really fear about this is that as society divides along ethnic lines, it will become what would you say, a quite it'll become black and white. You'll get to the stage where the the white population feels so besieged that they're not going to want to mix with anybody who isn't white. You know, don't want to give any quarter to anybody who isn't white, because there are so many of these race hustlers and troublemakers that they'll feel that none of them could be trusted, and that this is a real shame on so many levels. I mean, not least because people who um, have been here for decades, people who are born here second, third generation, who are quite happy and quite assimilated. The people we don't hear from very much because they don't make a lot of noise. They're going to find themselves on the sharp end of that. And in particular, what we romantically call the Windrush generation. That I mean, they were economic migrants as well, but they suffered the slings and arrows, and they tried to integrate, and most of them did. And up until about 20, 25 years ago, it was one of those things where it was a success story. And many of those people, and there's millions of them, are completely entrenched in British life. But it's all these tossers of the last who've arrived in the last 20 years or so. And this bloke, Northern Variant, the guy who inspired me to make this, was just talking about how you'll just get increasing white flight from the cities, and then people won't go out. They won't go out alone. They won't go out in their cars. There'll be no public transport. Because there's increasingly large number of people quite happy and willing to resort to deadly violence in the first instance, not in the last, in the first. And of course, we're an unarmed population. You know, I imagine to a certain degree that, I don't know, do Americans keep this in check with all their guns? I think they probably do, but I could be mistaken. Um, but as an unarmed population, you can't be going to places where all the machete gangs are hanging out. You just can't go there. Yeah. And the fabric of society will increasingly disintegrate. And, and the army will have to come in. And this is the thing about the army. People talk about the army as if it's the United States Army, as if it's millions strong. Our army is pathetic. It's a weakling. There's what, 77,000 people in the in the army, and that's half the size of the police force. They're not going to be able to do anything. And it does seem to be increasingly so that you import the third world, you get the third world. And I sometimes come out here and I think, you know, if I'm still here in 20 years, still living here, might be sooner. And I come out here at 5 in the morning, like I have today, and I see a group of blokes just walking across the field, machetes in hand, on a kind of a raiding party. And I think, well, what am I gonna do? I haven't got any weapons, I haven't got any machetes, I haven't got any firearms. I suppose I could always call a policeman. And to bring it back to sort of the here and now, I mean, this ridiculous general election, um, and There's just pathetic choices that we've got. Because it seems as if the choices we have is, if we vote in Labour, we'll get we'll get 2 million migrants arriving a year. If we vote in the Conservatives, we'll get 1 million. There is no voting our way out of this. It's just pathetic. Nigel Farage's entering the fray makes it a bit more interesting, but he's very tepid um, compared to what's happening on the continent. And maybe a continent is a source for optimism, actually, because young people in Europe are turning to the right, to nationalism. And of course, people, all the lefties will go, oh yeah, well, just like the Nazis. Yeah, well, yeah, what do they expect? Yeah. And I'm disinclined to vote for Nigel Farage, not because I don't trust him or anything. I think in many ways he's been the most influential politician of the last 25 years or so. He managed to bring this British establishment kicking and screaming to have a referendum on Brexit. Not that it's been achieved, but the fact that he even did that was impressive. But I don't know what the current state of affairs with their immigration policy is, but their ridiculous idea of one in, one out. It's just ridiculous. You know, you so if you've got 600,000 indigenous British people who believe in the rule of law and freedom of speech and liberal democracy and all those things. If you've got 600,000 of those people who leave every year to be replaced by 600,000 rootless, unemployable, violent young men who believe that women should walk around with a bag on their head. That's not a good thing at all, is it? One in, one out. That's fucking pathetic. So the only thing that would make me vote for him would be if he was to come out and say we're going to stop the boats tomorrow. If he could even do that, and we start deporting millions. We're already seeing the breakdown of, which in a way is a good thing, a breakdown of some societal norms. And what I mean by that is a sort of disobedience of people. Since Sadiq Khan got re-elected, and you've got to watch that fucker as well, because I've heard rumours that they're manoeuvring him to get in and replace Keir Starmer. You know, if you remember when um, the Pfeffel Johnson, he couldn't be mayor of London and an MP, so he was mayor of London for a while, and then he became. They made him an MP so that he could become prime minister. And if Sadiq Khan becomes prime minister, fuck me. As if Keir Starmer's not bad enough. But this sort of disobedience is there's increasing disobedience amongst the indigenous population, which is a good thing overall. Um, there's the Blade Runner's been taking all the cameras down in London, but now that's moved. That's spreading now. I've seen people taking them down in Wales and in Liverpool. That can only be a good thing. And I say that's a good thing because, obviously it's not a good thing for nobody to follow the rules. But if only one section of the population, i.e. the white indigenous part of the population, are the only ones following the rules, then it's to our detriment, isn't it? But this is the beginnings of that breakdown. It's like as society divides along ethnic lines, it will become, people will start forming militias. I remember when I read Malcolm X's autobiography, and he had some good takes on this sort of stuff, and it's when he was in some sort of debate with what he would call a white liberal or a white devil. He would say, whenever black people in America decide to arm themselves, it was always ominous, right? Ominous. When he said, well, you know, self-defense is not ominous. Self-defense is just intelligence. Self-defense is intelligent if you want to survive, anyway. And if that's been transposed in this country to, instead of the ominous blacks defending themselves in Jim Crow era America, we've now got a situation where anybody who would suggest that the indigenous population has to defend itself, then that will start to be described as ominous. I mean, we already had Mark Rowley after that extremely successful and extremely peaceful um, uh, Tommy demonstration last weekend, and without missing a beat, he described it as far right, extreme right. I think he said extreme right, the extreme right. It's and the demonisation will continue. That's the thing. I mean, it will continue to go, and it will get ratcheted up. And anybody who speaks out, they will continue to try to destroy. I mean, look at Lawrence Fox. I mean, whatever you might think of him, he's not perfect. He's not perfect. He said some daft things, but they've destroyed him. I mean, they haven't completely destroyed him yet. But that man's in trouble. If you look at him, I don't know if it's drink or anything or whatever it is, but that man's in trouble. And he's in trouble because he's human. I mean, imagine if you'd lived your whole life, 45, 50 years in in a group of people, in a milieu of people that you thought were just like you, generally just like you, and then someone calls you a racist on Question Time, and you don't take it. You don't take it, and you fight back, and you say, "Fuck you! I'm not a racist. Don't call me a racist." And they have fucking destroyed him. You know, I fear for him. I don't think he's going to last much longer. I mean, the hatred he gets is just off the scale. It's astonishing. I mean, I suppose cumulatively it's nothing compared to what Tommy Robinson has had to deal with. Um, but you know, whatever you might think of Tommy Robinson, you know he's a man of great moral character, I think, and you know he's been hardened and tempered and annealed by the opposition he's received over the years. I mean, Lawrence Fox is just a newcomer. You know, he's just a, yeah, he's a softy middle class bloke. Who's just come into it. And found himself in the midst of this massive battle, and I don't think he's going to survive much longer. You know, and um, as much of an enemy as all these what Northern variant describes as these garbage, low IQ third worlders are, as much of an enemy as they are, they're nothing compared to the enemy of the establishment and the lefty establishment. But we always said it was going to get worse before it got better, didn't we? And this is it getting worse. And there are often things that we all say they're kind of tropes, really. But it but like most of these things, they have some truth to them. There is a fundamental truth. We say, oh well, we're doing this for our grandchildren. Well, actually, I think we are, and I think that there is a danger. I mean, there's a real danger to our grandchildren and to our children, and there is even a danger to us. I mean, this is likely to happen within my lifetime. I'm 56 now. And with every year that I get older, I will be less able to be able to fight back. And I've been thinking for quite some years actually that even before COVID, when I was still mostly focused on surveillance, it was I didn't want my free society to be snuffed out on my watch. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want. I mean, who knows what the history books are going to say about us. But I don't really want to be thought of as the generation that let it all go away, let it all be surrendered. We are going to have to look at our children, our grandchildren in the eyes, because some of them, not all of them, because like all the rest of the time, most people will just be brainwashed into thinking that there's this is how things should be. And the Muslim dominated fascist society that we've got is is the correct one. But some of them won't. Yeah, quite a lot of them will look at us and say, "Well, why didn't you fucking do anything? How could it not be obvious to you?" And this is the thing that's so frustrating, is that to us, this stuff is obvious. It's a clear and present danger. And you point out, and it's like, "Oh, you're a racist, mate. You're a racist." It's like Tommy Robinson, Lance Fox. I mean, we have to remember that we are in the minority. The indigenous white population is still in the majority. Sorry, we're still in the majority. But when so many of the majority are completely asleep, and quite a lot of them are just, well, traitorous, traitorous. I mean the same thing, but you know what I mean. The fifth column is there, front and centre, and they're running everything. They're the ones that won't stop the boats. And these are your compatriots. These are the people that, in different times, you might have might have thought that they would fight alongside you to defend the ideals they pretend to care about: freedom, democracy, rule of law, freedom of speech, all of these things. But they wouldn't. They are the ones that would have collaborated. You know, COVID showed us that. There's more and more a feeling of how long have we got? And there are so many things as well that we still take as being um, uh, that we have faith in. You know, a woman was posting the other day. She was saying she wanted to do an investigation on bottled water, and she was saying, "How do we know it's not just tap water?" Yeah. And and I think that was a good point. And you know, how do we know? We know because somebody's told us it isn't. You know, and we imagine there's a whole load of laws and regulations that people will follow to ensure that it isn't just tap water. But you know, how do we really know? You know, I was speaking to a woman a few months ago who was involved in the um, who was involved in how elections are uh, done to make them free and fair. And she said that there is an awful lot of safeguards to make sure that it is, that the elections are safe, you know, and they are genuine. And I'm sure that is the case. But I've only got her word for it. You know, I don't know that for certain. You know, and if that changes, will we ever find out? So as we continue to lose more and more faith in our society and our institutions the way they are, um, things that are obvious were the things that we end up relying on, and you know that in some respects that is a good thing, um, because we'll be going back to first principles. You know, um, even in the instances of flat earthers and stuff. You know, I mean, um, I mean, how can I prove the world is round? You know, I'm told that it's true. Um, but the downside of that is the things that are obvious, like the colour of somebody's skin, will be the marker but by which people think whether or not they can trust somebody. And how sad is that? After all we've come through, after all we've managed to do. And the sort of ethno nationalists will be loving this, you know, and they'll be saying things like, "Well, we told you, these people can't be trusted," you know, and yeah, there's another guy that I follow. Um, he's a very patriotic sort of chap, but he happens to be black. He's a very dark-skinned black man. And he's been. I think maybe he was born here. He's been here since he was, a small child. And he says he gets. He made this very powerful point that when people call him an Uncle Tom, he says, well, am I supposed to think that I have more in common with Lee Rigby's killers than I have with my best friend since I've known since I was 5, just because we have the similar skin tone? And I do fear for these people. do fear for people like that because they're going to be the first casualties. So we're going to get the total inverse of what Martin Luther King said. We are going to judge people by the colour of their skin rather than by the content of their character, because their content of their character is not going to mean shit. Yeah, that's a black man. Let's get him. I mean, it's funny because at the Tommy demonstration, you know, last weekend, there were quite a number of non-white people there. I won't overdo it. I mean, there probably wasn't as certainly if you take it in London, they weren't in proportion compared to the amount of non-white people there are in London, but they probably were close to that proportion in the wider country. You know, out of 100 people, probably 15 of them were not white. I mean, this is I hate to look at people like this. I suppose and this is the whole thing about we have to start looking at people like this according to some people, and it's I really don't want to. I just don't fucking want to. That's not what I find interesting or admirable or otherwise about other people. I had uh, a little example, and I can be making too much of it. I don't know, but nevertheless, I noticed it. Um, I was, me and my colleague were employed to. This woman had bought a show kitchen from a kitchen showroom, and me and my colleague we went and she paid us some money to dismantle it so that it could be taken away. And you know, we did the job and we did it as well as we could and we were very careful and all the rest of it. And then she got these two blokes to come and pick it up, and they were Africans. You know, I thought West Africans sounded by their accent they were West Africans, but they were. I think she said they might have been Congolese, so they were French speaking. So it might just have been a language issue, but they seemed to speak English a bit, you know, enough to, enough to function, And my colleague and I were, we made efforts to kind of make common cause with them, that we're just ordinary blokes doing this little job, and we're taking this kitchen down, and you're going to take it away, and we're just. I mean, I hate to make a sort of patronising thing about it, but just working class blokes doing a job. And me and my colleagues, we tried to sort of engage with them on a kind of human level, and they weren't interested. And I tried a couple of times, and after the third time, I thought, well, fuck it, they're not interested they're not interested in being. I don't want to be my friends, but they're not interested in being friendly. They weren't fucking interested. You know, they also a pair of cowboys as well, which yeah, I was less annoyed by, but I was still a bit annoyed considering the care with which we taking this kitchen down, and they just banged it against all the other kitchens, taking it out. Um, and I just thought, well, that was indicative of people who are not interested in becoming a part of this society. They're just not interested, you know. And the reason I mention it is because a couple of days later, I was driving through a village near me, and it's very tight, and It's a little village, got lots of parked cars and stuff. And I was driving my car through there, and there was a bloke who was doing something in his car, and he had one of his doors open on the drive on the outside. So I was trying to drive past, and his door was open, so it was kind of in the way. And his hatchback was open. He was doing something, and he saw me, and he saw us trying to get past, and he kind of rushed round to the other side of the to his car, and 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 quickly shut the door, and then he kind of acknowledged me and smiled at me. Oh, sorry, mate. That was what it was a fleeting thing. It was gone in a second, but and that was somebody who he didn't know me, didn't know me from Adam, but well, I'm inconveniencing someone. Well, I better try not to inconvenience them. It's kind of a social thing. I'm in the way. Oh, sorry, mate. Oh, let me sort that out, and then you can be on your way. That kind of thing. It was just a glance. It was nothing. Maybe I'm making too much of it. But that was someone who was what you might say acculturalized to the society. Whereas these other blokes, they just weren't interested. They weren't interested in being nice. They weren't interested in being friendly. They weren't interested in making any human connection. But the thing about the guy with the car is that the guy with the car was also black. You know, there was a bloke who was acculturalized, and there was other blokes who weren't. And I don't know, because I didn't speak to him, so I've no idea. But I'd be willing to bet that that bloke had been in this country for many years, rather than these other Congolese blokes who just turned up 5 minutes ago. Yeah. So I don't think it is a racial thing. Yeah. But as far as the um, as this election goes, I mean, like I say, the only thing that's going to make you vote for Farage is if he says, well, we're going to stop all the immigration, all of it, all of it, and we're going to start making plans to deport people, you know, and yeah, I don't want to besmirch Farage's character particularly. I think he's done a lot of good things, like everyone else, he's not perfect, you know, and nobody is perfect. Tommy Robinson's not perfect. Lawrence Fox is not perfect. Um, and we don't in a functioning society, you don't need people to be perfect for them to do good things. And we're already seeing this sectarianism, with all these Muslim people. Just they're quite open about it. Vote for him because he's a Muslim. I encourage all Muslims to vote for him. You know, we've got no idea of whether these people are good, bad, or indifferent. The only thing that's important to them is that he's a Muslim. That's all that they care about. They don't care about anything else. But countries can get taken over. There are, as I've mentioned, there are precedents for this, and I've been saying for quite a number of years, way before Brexit um, and COVID, that we are particularly susceptible to a fascist or communist takeover, a totalitarian takeover, because we've never had it. We haven't had it for hundreds of years. And so we think that it'll never happen. So I suppose we've got to brace ourselves for several years of a traitorous, anti-British, anti-white Labour government. So all of the things that we fear are going to get an awful lot worse in the next few years. I mean, maybe that's what is needed. Maybe that is what is needed. But it does seem astonishing that, you know, a society so not great, because that suggests glorification and stuff, but an easy and pleasant society is just going to commit suicide within a generation. And the other thing, of course, is which we have to concern ourselves with is that, what does a collapse look like? We're I think in that guy's post he said that it won't be like Syria with people getting gassed and bombed and stuff like that, but it will just be chaos all the time and everywhere, and all trust will be gone, and everybody will be looking over their shoulder at each other, and there'll be no social cohesion. There'll only be conflict and bitterness, and eventually just violence. And violence will be hanging there in the air all the time, everywhere you go. But in a way, this is our fault. We've let it get this bad. Yeah. I mean, it's not really our fault, really, because, but we've trusted the wrong people. We thought that, in a way, it's our own stupid racism as well, in that we thought that these people were just like us because they looked like us, because they were polite and spoke English properly, and wore suits to work, and obeyed the rules of the road, and we didn't realise what traitors they were. But this is going to be our war, and we have to fight it. If we don't fight it, our kids will have to fight it. And if things carry on the way they are, they won't even know that they have to fight it. They'll just think it's normal. So, anyway, take care, everybody. Keep your chin up and try and stay free.